Our guest today is Jennifer Ong. She is currently a career coach where she has helped and is helping unhappy high achievers identify and pivot into a career they love. On her website, she writes, and I quote, "I'm a career coach focused on helping you identify and land a job that you will wake up excited," in caps, by the way, for, unquote. So obviously we're going to talk a lot about that later on. Jennifer is also the host of the podcast called Control Alt Career, spelled as CTRL, Alt as in ALT. In the podcast, she interviews guests in Asia who have left behind a corporate job to build a business that they're passionate about. Her podcast was also where I first got to know about Jennifer. She herself is not a stranger to career change. She was born and raised in Hong Kong, and at 18, she left to study financial economics and psychology at Columbia University, one of the prestigious Ivy League schools. After graduation, she spent 7 years climbing the corporate ladder and became a VP at BlackRock, the largest, if not one of the largest asset management companies in the world. Despite achieving what society deems as success, at least in the conventional or dare I say Asian sense, she sensed something was missing. She eventually found the courage to leave BlackRock and became a general manager at Style Theory, a fashion startup backed by SoftBank. Now, fast forward to today. One of the reasons why I'm so thrilled to speak with her for this podcast is that I've been a fan of her work so far, and from afar as well. My Instagram is bombarded with her posts and short videos of career messages, and all in a very positive and inspirational way, of course. Jennifer is also my latest internet friend, and I hope we will remain as friends after today's conversation, where we'll discuss all things career. So welcome to the podcast, Jennifer, and how could I have made the introduction of you better?
Amazing. Thank you so much, John. And honestly, you did such a good job. Like, I don't have more to add. I feel like I can end the podcast here now. You know everything about me.
No. I do justice to my guests here because you spend time here, and I'm thankful for your time. And I just want to do the background research and make sure that I introduce you correctly.
I appreciate it. And honestly, so honored to be on your podcast and be able to speak with you and share my story with your listeners.
So, there are two big themes in our conversation that I want to discuss today. I think one is about your own career change journey, and the second part is about career coaching, right? So maybe I'll just jump in right now. Tell us, maybe you want to tell us a bit about your career. Maybe you want to summarize your career in a bit for us.
Sure. So I think what you did was a good summary of what my career looks like on paper, but maybe it'll be helpful for me to share the emotions behind that career journey and what my thinking was there. So yeah, I mean, I grew up with a very conservative view of what a career should look like, right? I was very much taught that a career is where you work hard, get promoted, make money, and you keep a lot of what you're passionate about on the side as a hobby. So with that sort of deeply instilled in me, even when I went to university, I very much had that thought in my head, right? I was like, okay, I gotta go to a good university. I gotta get good grades. I gotta get a good job. And so I did, right? I went to university. I studied economics, mostly because it was one of the careers or one of the majors that leads you to lucrative career path. And also because it opens the most doors for you, right? So actually back then, I wasn't so sure what I wanted to major in. One of the things that I looked into that I thought about majoring in was actually art history. But obviously that was very quickly vetoed because,
By parents?
By my parents.
Okay.
Because, it's not necessarily the most lucrative career path for me. And so, I was like, you know what? Okay, actually, economics is pretty interesting. So why don't I go down this path? And especially coming from someone who didn't know what I wanted in life. I was not someone who was very opinionated as a kid. And even nowadays, honestly, I don't really have strong inclinations towards things. And so as a college student, I didn't have strong inclinations towards any particular major. And so I was like, okay, you know what? Since I don't know what to do, economics is a major that makes sense. That'll open the most doors for me. And so I majored in economics, and before you graduate, obviously you go look for a job. And during that period of time, a lot of companies come to recruit on campus. And so I saw that a lot of my peers were applying for jobs in finance. And so being a competitive person, I was like, oh my God, all my peers are getting jobs in finance. I should probably also go down that path. But I didn't actually know what that entailed or if I was actually interested in that industry. It was very much like, okay, everybody's doing this. And so I got to do this as well. And I got to do it better. And I got to get those jobs. And so looking back now, I think obviously it kind of made sense that I wasn't so passionate about moving into this industry, given that I didn't go in for kind of the right reasons. But I did, I applied, I got the job, I started working at BlackRock. And so on paper, my career looked great, right? It was everything that you possibly want from life, right? You got paid a good amount of money. It was working at a very prestigious company. The benefits were great. I had decent work-life balance. I still had a life, which was amazing. And I worked with amazing colleagues, right? I loved the people that I worked with. And so on paper, it looks like I was very successful. And I think that was the hard part for me, because at that point, while on paper I looked so successful, I felt miserable inside. And I think that was a very hard thing for me to come to terms with, because my entire life I've been told to do things and I've achieved those things. And those things have brought me happiness. Getting to a good university, all of that stuff, they all brought happiness to me. But
and I'm gonna cut you here. And
course.
Also making your parents happy is also part of your happiness, right?
Exactly. And so, as someone who wasn't sure about what she wanted to do, a lot of the times you do take inspiration from your parents. And my parents always told me things or advised me on things, and those outcomes were always very positive. And so I would I did listen to them, and it was always the right decision. And so I think this was really the first time where I did, and I don't think I really went into finance because of my parents. I went into finance because it was the next logical thing to do. Mm-hmm. So I don't think that I went into finance because of my parents' advice, right? I think it was just, they were like, oh, if you don't know what to do, maybe do economics. Mm-hmm. And so I think it was very much like, okay, once I decided economics, then I happened into finance. And then when I was in finance, then I was like, okay, I think this is where I'm like, okay, I achieved all these things that other people think are good for me. And on paper, it looks like I should be happy, but why am I not happy?
Yeah.
And I think that was a very isolating experience.
I'm going to take one step before that, and I want to ask about Columbia, right? Mm. You're the first Ivy League graduate that I interviewed in my podcast. So I'm curious, right? I mean, from outside, it looks like damn shiny, right? It's Ivy League school. How was it like? I mean, you uprooted yourself. You went to US to study at Columbia in 18 years old. How was it like?
It was, it's a good question.
3 words to describe your experiences.
Honestly, it was so fun. Maybe too much fun.
Okay.
It was like really my first time it's like the best part of adulthood without any of the abilities, the burden, and you're just free to explore and be whoever you want to be, right? Like you have no one, like you're in a brand new city. Mm-hmm. I had the opportunity to really just be a new person. I could be whoever I wanted to be because no one there knew. I mean, I had a few friends that I knew beforehand who were also there, but I was basically free to be whoever I wanted to be. And the world really felt like your oyster back then. And I think that was such a cool feeling. And you really could try so many things. And you just met such interesting people that you've never come across ever in your life before. Mm-hmm. And I think that was truly the coolest part. And they all had something cool you could learn from them. Mm-hmm. And so you were just learning not just in school, but also learning from your peers. And there were so many opportunities that you could do whatever you wanted, whether it was like, something academic or even just like random things like hobbies, like on the side. There was just so like an abundance of opportunity. I think that was really the coolest thing about.
What did you do at BlackRock? I know you spent 7 years. I'm curious, and like your transition, right, from this really cool, fun time at Columbia in school and now BlackRock. So what do you do at BlackRock? Can you just walk us through like your career journey at BlackRock?
So I started off at BlackRock in a role that honestly, I still today wonder if they hired the right girl. So I make a joke out of this because okay, let me answer your question first before I tell the story. So the first role I did at BlackRock was in the client analytics group. So what that means is we basically work within BlackRock solutions. So we're not in the investment side of BlackRock. So we're more in like how do you call this? Wow, it's been so long since I've had to sell this. It's more like, you can think of it as like the equivalent of like a data service, right? Or a risk management service. So kind of like a tool that we would sell to our clients. So I was on that side of BlackRock, and I was basically in charge of, I was in the team that was basically serving Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, which are these government-sponsored entities focus on mortgages. So basically what I was doing was helping them run risk models on their mortgage portfolio. Even when I say those words out loud to you today, I cannot believe I did them. Because that sounds like damn difficult / fancy. And I'm like, how in the world did I ever make it? And so obviously I had to learn a lot on the job. Basically what the job entailed was a lot of like querying databases, analyzing data, running risk models, and being able to kind of interpret that data and explain that to your clients. Or if there was anything wrong with the model, you needed to be able to QC it, and they'd be upset if the report was not showing the numbers that they were expecting. So yeah, I had to, which was crazy because I didn't come from like a data science, computer science type of background. I literally studied in a liberal arts. I got a liberal arts degree in economics. I did not know what a database even was. It's honestly astonishing that they hired me into this role. And so I do make this joke because I think they hired the wrong girl into this role. Because basically in the same time that I joined, there was also another girl called Jennifer, also from Colombia, who did study engineering, who was hired into this role. And I was like, dude, they definitely just forgot which girl they wanted. And so they hired us both.
Maybe you give yourself too little credit, you know, but we will discover that as the rest of this episode unfolds. Yeah, okay. And then so there was BlackRock, and I think you did several roles within BlackRock.
Yes.
Right?
So then that was actually just a really bad fit, right? Obviously, it was everything that I was bad at. And I think that that's when I realized, wow, if you are in a bad job, it can really take a toll on you emotionally. Like I really lost a lot of self-confidence in that job because every day I would go to work and be reminded of how bad I am at working. And I think it really hit me hard because I was good at studying. And I thought, wow, maybe I am just good at studying and I am not actually good at working. And I think that really, because that was my very first job, right? And so that really took a toll on me and my self-confidence. And I think that self-confidence took many, many years to rebuild. Like I would say even after leaving BlackRock and starting my new job at Style Theory, I don't think I was still fully back. That self-confidence took many, many years. And I think I'm only starting to come back out of it. And so I think this is a prelude to why I do career coaching, but I think that was really one of the main reasons why I want to help people in this space, right? Because I understand that a bad job is not just a bad job and it affects you, who you are for years to come. It also affects the relationship you have with people around you. Because actually during that period of time when I was so unhappy about my job, I had to release that negative energy somewhere, right? And you would have to put on a brave face, go to work and pretend like everything's okay. But that negativity would start seeping into my personal life. And so I did start to see some of my relationships with people around me start to get affected. And I think I was just easily agitated as a person in general as well.
Was you being unhappy at your first stint at BlackRock caused you to move internally to another stint?
Yes. So at that point in time, I was like, oh my God, I need to get out of here. I actually knew like 9 months into the job that I needed to leave. But back then I was like, oh, maybe life will get better when I get promoted, right? If you get promoted, like maybe it will not be as tough, you know, maybe if I make more money, it'll be okay. Maybe if I have a junior helping me, it'll be okay. So I made all these, you know, assumptions or rules. And I also had a big fear because back then I thought, oh my God, what if I leave after 6 months? Am I going to be hireable? Like, where will I go next? Will people see me as like a millennial who's jumping from job to job and can't hold a job down? And so I think I had a lot of these limiting beliefs and fears, and that's why I stuck it out. So basically I stuck it out for 2 years because that's when I got promoted. And when I got promoted, I was able then to move internally to another job. So at that point in time, I still loved the organization that I was in. I loved the people that I worked with. I just didn't like the job I was in, right? And so then I started exploring internally because I thought it would be easiest to move internally. And at that point in time, I was also thinking, oh, should I maybe move back to Hong Kong? Because I had lived in New York for 7 years at that point, and I think it's such a fun place to be in when you're young. But I think after a while, the city starts to be a little much. And I think it was just time for me to just be closer to home as well. So then I was able to find a job within BlackRock in the Hong Kong office, where I was a product strategist for Asian equities. So what that means is I was basically a sales specialist selling Asian equity funds. So yeah, that was a lot more, a much better fit and a lot more fun. I mean, I don't know if you can tell, but I am an extrovert. I love talking to people. And so definitely a sales role was just a way better fit for me than like, grinding out numbers at the back. And also Asian equities was also a lot of fun because you're looking at companies. And for me, I always had an interest in learning about how companies are run. And so then I just thought this was an amazing next step for me. So the first few months or the first year or more, I actually was really excited about this job. And I was like, oh, like this is actually pretty cool. Like it's definitely an upgrade from my last job. And yeah, and I got to be closer to home. And so I thought that it was great.
Nice. And you climbed to the role of VP, right? Which must be huge.
I did, yes. So
tell me how excited you were, how happy you were. Yeah, I mean, I can only look from the outside, right? Like, hey, BlackRock, I'm in Colombia, BlackRock VP, come on. And like, what the hell is she thinking to leave that?
I think that's the thing.
Tell me.
On the outside, my career looked amazing, right? I think that was what made it so much harder to leave behind because nobody really understood, why are you unhappy? This is what everybody wants. They're paying you good money. You're not working that hard. Why do you want more from life? Like you have what everybody wants. Just be grateful. I think that was really the hard part. But anyway, so let me go back to answer your question. It was pretty awesome, I guess. But on the outside, I guess. But I think internally, while you're working towards goals like that, you always feel like this is just like a given, right? At some point, I need to get this, and you always. It sounds so bad, but like I think you almost are upset when you don't get it. But I mean, I worked hard. I worked damn hard for this.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And I think I wanted to do this because I was already thinking about leaving finance at that point in time. And I knew I didn't want to leave finance if I was just an associate, because I am actually a very risk averse person. So basically, I was thinking, if I leave finance and I pursue something else, if I hate it, I don't want to come back and start as an associate again in my 30s. Whereas I know a lot of people who are VPs still even in their 30s. And I was like, okay, maybe if I leave with a VP title, at least I can come back into this industry as a VP rather than having to be an associate. And so I put a lot of pressure on myself to be able to achieve VP because I wanted to create that safety net for myself to be able to take that next leap.
But with that, you spend more time in the corporate world, in not the happiest.
Which is so silly,
misery, right? I mean, so you prolong your misery, right?
So right? Silly.
But I'm not judging you here, but I can totally understand your rationale back then, right? And like you said, you're a very risk-averse person, so that explains why you thought that way. Yep. And it's a very rational move, I must say. It's a very good, calculated move. So, but yeah, okay, so I'm going to find out more about the story later on. So VP at BlackRock, awesome. That's great. And then tell me, what's next? Where do you go next?
So as soon as I got VP, I basically then was like, I'm out of here. And I think my boss was maybe disappointed. I don't know. Shocked. I don't know if he was. Honestly, my boss was pretty awesome at BlackRock. He was so supportive. I think I was so scared giving my resignation letter because I thought I let him down for leaving him behind after he worked so, because a lot of times with these promotions, your boss needs to stand up, stick his neck out for you as well, right? So yeah. I did feel kind of bad for him, sticking his head out for me, supporting me, sponsoring me, and me kind of just leaving him high and dry right after I got my promotion. And the amazing thing was he actually gave me an insane pay raise as well. And I think I felt so bad. I think I felt so bad about leaving that I actually delayed it by 1 month. As in, like, I would be like, today is the day. And I couldn't do it. I'd be like, okay, no, today is the day. Okay, no. And so I actually like procrastinated leaving for a month. So I actually didn't leave until like didn't talk to my boss until like maybe end Jan. And I only did that because he was like then going on holiday for like an extended period of time. And I was like, oh my God, today's the last day. I got to do it. So I think going into that conversation with my boss was probably one of the scariest things, not because my boss would have a bad reaction. I knew he would be supportive, and he was so supportive, like truly so supportive. But I think because it was for me to close this chapter of my life, and it felt so scary. And I think that's why I prolonged this decision for so long, because it was like, am I really ready to leave this company behind, to leave this life behind?
Did you leave with a job offer?
I did not. So
okay.
I knew I was close to getting an offer, but I knew that no matter what, I would be leaving anyway.
So
I
you're
think that
more
made
sure
it a
about
little bit
leaving
scary.
than about the next step. What next step would look like?
Yeah.
Okay. I want to come back to one point about entitlement, right? I mean, what I'm writing on my notes is that the sense of entitlement starts creeping in at a corporate job. Why do you think that's the way?
I think everybody just assumes that they're going to. I think people treat promotions. Okay, I'm not going to say people. I would say I treat promotions like you do graduating from school. You think that if you hit certain KPIs and get good scores, that you are going to naturally be promoted. Because your entire life you've been primed that if you do this, you will get to the next level, to the next level, to the next level. And so you think that that's the same thing that's going to happen in the corporate world. But I think, I mean, it was a lesson to me that it's not the case, right? Promotions are not that straightforward.
And this just occurred to me, right? That this could also be a reason why so many people feel so unfulfilled or unhappy at their corporate jobs, because subtly, subconsciously or unconsciously, this sense of entitlement has really crept in their psyche. And when they're expecting to get promoted, but they didn't get promoted, they feel even more unhappy, right? Exactly. And it's a circular cycle, right, to this. Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Exactly. I didn't expect to get this insight with you, but okay, it's great. And I'll come back to this point about you felt so scared. It was so scary for you to move and close this chapter, and you were getting close to an offer. Was the offer where you landed at after that?
Yes. So it was Style Theory, which is the fashion rental startup in Singapore. So that was truly an amazing. I was shocked that such a job out there existed, and even more shocked that I was able to pivot my experiences into that new role. Honestly, this was as close to a dream job as I possibly could have ever imagined, because I knew I was interested in fashion, but I couldn't quite figure out what I wanted to do within fashion. So that took a lot of time trying to figure that out. And I think I always had preconceived notions that fashion is something you have like for fun, like it's a hobby, like you don't really need to pursue this as a career. And I think I always thought that like, I'm not super creative. I'm not a designer. I could never be in fashion. But actually there's a lot of roles within fashion, and there's also subcategories within fashion. It's just about figuring out what within the industry you want to go into. And there's always a place for you. So I think for me, this was amazing because I always felt strongly about sustainability. And so this company was really promoting sustainable fashion, which was really aligned with my mission. And I was able to find a role where it was just about building a company, building a business. And I think that was something that I always wanted to learn. And that was actually one of the reasons why I was attracted to Asian equities back then at BlackRock, right? Because I always wanted to learn how companies were run. And so this time I got to really see what it was like to run a company. And I also got to see what it's like to work at a startup, because back then startups were all the rage. Like everybody wanted to go try working at a startup. And I had experience working at a large corporate. I wanted to see what it was like to work for a smaller company, a company that was VC backed, that had massive growth targets. So I wanted to see and experience that world. And I was amazed to be able to find a job that had this intersection between, working for a VC backed startup and fashion and my mission in sustainability.
And it sounds like a dream job, right? For your interest, for your passion and impact in fashion and sustainability. I want to know, how did you end up landing, or your job search landing at Style Theory in the end? Like, do you interview other companies? How do you go about your job search?
I did. I actually approached the job search in the way that I teach people not to do now, which is I just blasted my resume everywhere, right? I didn't basically I just would be like, oh, Facebook sounds cool. Google sounds cool. Grab sounds cool. Like maybe I should go apply to them. And I did, right? I got interviews and proceeded for a lot of these types of companies. But I think where I realized was that I was so much more excited about the Style Theory job than any of these other jobs. I remember I got to I think I even got an offer. I don't remember. But anyway, I got really far along for Grab, and it was for Grab drivers. And so I think, I forgot exactly what the role was, but I remember one of the interview questions was like, how would you go about like managing drivers or something along those lines, something around like drivers basically, and like cars and fleets and stuff at Grab, right? And then I was like, this problem is very interesting intellectually to solve, but am I actually interested in working daily with drivers and with like understanding how cars and fleets should be operated and all of that versus, you know, thinking about like, oh, how would you grow a fashion business, a business? How would you get people to adopt this service? That to me sounded way more interesting and exciting, not just in terms of like the intellectual piece of thinking about a challenging problem, but also in terms of the actual product itself. And so I think when I had those interviews in a close, you know, over the course of a couple of days or in the same week, I think that's when it really hit me that, okay, this is something that I'm way more interested in.
Going through more interviews and sending more CVs than you should have on hindsight has that benefit, right? Although it was not very targeted, but at least from what I observe, it gave you the chance to sit at other interviews to realize what you don't like in the end. And that might make you realize what you like or make you like whatever you like even more and reaffirm your interest in style theory, for example. That's how I see it. And
So
go on, sorry.
So the interview process is a way that I teach my students to go through to test drive their career. Because a lot of times, like before you really go into that career, it's hard for you to know. But if you're prepping for that interview, or when you're going through that interview, you have a really good sense of what to expect from that job. So a lot of times with some of my students, that is one of the ways, right? Yes, I think by all means, do send out your resume to some of these companies and just learn. That's part of your learning journey, part of the research journey. And a lot of the times when you fail to proceed, it's sometimes because it's just not a good fit for you.
Yep.
You didn't think that you were as passionate about it as you originally thought. And you were maybe going into this role because you thought it sounded cool.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah, I like that at this point. I have to ask you this question about the pay cut, right? You just told me how wonderful it was to be a VP, at least financially.
Yeah,
I think.
it was insane.
Right? Yeah. And then you join Style Theory, which is a startup, and obviously they have limited resources.
Yep.
And that's what startup is all about, right? Trying to get a product market fit. And I think probably it was still not at the scaling stage yet, or maybe it was at the beginning of still scaling stage when you joined them. How do you deal with this pay cut? How do you justify it internally?
It was an insane pay cut. I took more than 50% of a pay cut. And when I saw the salary offer, I was literally shocked because I was like, how do people live on this kind of salary? Not to sound like entitled or anything, but I think just to be totally vulnerable and transparent with you guys, I think when I got that offer, because even with my first job, I made way more money than I did there. And I was an experienced hire. But I knew going into a startup that I would take a pay cut. I just didn't expect the sort of pay cut that they asked of me. Yeah. Obviously, I negotiated and there was like a little bit of a bump from there, but I knew going into this. So how I came to terms with this was I treated this as my business school. I gave myself 2 years to either go to business school and spend, hundreds of thousands of dollars going to business school to learn how to run a business, or I go actually work at this company and get paid a small stipend to learn. A stipend sounds like such a bad term because it was still like somewhat of a fair salary, but I think back then, I don't want to sound entitled.
No, I get it.
But
no,
back
I get
then,
it.
I think it was just such a,
Let me help you here. I think it's all about context, right? And the context meaning like you move from somewhere, from A to B, and if A was somewhere very high up there, and even if it's a one level down, right, you feel that shit, why should I getting less, right? And it's not being entitled. I think it's about the context, right? That you move down. And most people, when they move career, they move up, or at least equal, right? So, and I think people, being adults, that's what adulting is all about, right? You have responsibilities, you want to spend, you get used to a certain kind of lifestyle. So I understand that. I don't think it's entitled. And but I just wanted to know how you deal with that.
Yeah,
right?
So I think that's how I treated it, was that it was my business school. I was basically investing in my own education, and I knew very clearly what I wanted to learn out of this job. And there were clear outcomes that I wanted to take away from this job. So this was the very first time in my career and actually in my life that I was so clear about what I wanted and set such a clear timeline around how long I would spend at this job and what I wanted out of it and what I wanted to learn.
And then Jennifer, from Style Theory, you went on to be a full-time career coach. So tell us, how did that happen?
Yeah, so it actually all started with a podcast. So I actually started the Control Alt Career podcast during Circuit Breaker because I am an extrovert and Circuit Breaker was really tough on me because I couldn't go see anybody, couldn't talk to anybody. And I was like, you know what? I listen to a lot of podcasts. Why don't I start a podcast? I have nothing to do. And so actually back then I was debating between starting a podcast or a YouTube channel or an Instagram account, or even a blog post or like a website. And I basically ran a survey. I just sent it to a few friends and I asked, hey, if I were to start something covering career transition, what medium would you want to consume this information from? So basically, I am not the most decisive person out there. And when I don't know what to do, I generally try to crowdsource the answer. So because I wasn't sure what medium would make sense for people, how do people like to consume content? I was like, you know what, let me just ask. And so I did. And people were like, podcast. And so I was like, okay, let me go figure out how to start a podcast. And so I did. I started the podcast. The very first episode was complete crap, I must say, in terms of like the quality of the sound. I did not have a mic back then and I just did it over Zoom. And so if you go back to listen to the very first episode, you'll realize the quality is pretty crap.
I can relate to that. So you're not alone. I made my fair share of mistakes, right? I got a mic, yes, but my first few episodes, I just blew my fan and my mic, which is terrible because there's no distortion. So I did stupid things as well.
Yeah.
You need to learn. And I just want to share very quickly at this point is that I started my podcast and I was also spending a lot of time thinking about it, like all the concept, all the logo, all the colors and all that. But I got this message, right, that is that if you talk to the most successful people, at least content creators, when you ask them about their first set of content, it's always terrible, right? Because people get better with time. But you need to go in and jump in and start messy, right? And that's how you learn and you live and learn, exactly what you said. So I totally relate to that. So don't take it too hard on yourself.
Yes.
At least, yeah, we can relate to each other.
100%. And I think so many people wait for perfection and end up not doing anything. And so I used to be someone like that too. Like there were so many ideas I used to have for side hustles that just died because they were just ideas that I got so wrapped up with the details of. For example, like what to name my company. I used to spend like hours, days, weeks, months, like literally considering what to name my company when that was literally like the least important thing. Or like, how should my logo look like? So not important.
Exactly.
Put your product out there, whether it's a podcast episode or whatever it might be, and just all the things will slowly come to place. You can improve and iterate as you go forward. You have to be embarrassed by the very first version. And you have to be scared to put it out. I was really scared putting out my very first episode. Who am I to start a podcast? What story do I have to tell? Who's going to listen to this? You know, I think a lot of those fears and imposter syndrome is there, but you just do it. As corny as that sounds.
No, 100%. 100% agree.
And then you
that.
iterate and you improve over time. And I think I started the podcast not expecting to become a career coach at all. Right. And you would be surprised by the doors that potentially open up for you once you start something. Oh, and I do want to share this because I don't think I've really shared this story before, which is I actually started two things at the same time. So the podcast I started at the same time as me just drawing and printing phone cases. So I actually did a bunch of illustrations at the same time. And I was also selling phone cases of my illustrations. But that did not receive much traction at all. And so I very quickly closed that down. Right. But at the same time, I saw that the podcast was taking off. I was getting a lot of people randomly sharing with their own network, being inspired by the stories, people writing into me saying, thank you for creating this podcast. And I was like, okay, now I just double down on the podcast. So you see, again, I'm not the most decisive person. I just put things out there and then the market kind of tells you what you should continue doing.
Yes, 100%. I agree. You need to put your product out there. I wanted to add one more point that nothing in life or most things in life are not irreversible anyway. Maybe except having a child, maybe, because, you know, once you have a child, you can't redo it. But most of the things out there, if you put something out there, it doesn't work, there's no market demand, okay, stop, take it out, it's okay, right? You move on, right?
Exactly.
So 100%. And so you did two things at the same time, and then you thought that, and you saw a lot more traction about your podcast.
Exactly. So basically, I started the podcast, and I didn't expect it to take off actually in the way that it did and to get so many shares the way that it did. Because I've tried a lot of things in the past, right? And I don't really see that same sort of support in my network about sharing my product or sharing my side hustle, right? This time around, when I shared this podcast, people were just happily sharing to their own social media profiles without me asking them to. Like they would just be like, wow, that's so cool that you're doing this. Let me just share with my friends and maybe it'll help other people. And so then that's how it kind of just organically grew. And after a while, I just started getting people writing in, being like, oh my God, thank you so much for creating this podcast. This has been so helpful. I've been struggling with my own career struggles and trying to figure out the next step for me. And I also got some university students writing in, right? They'd be like, oh, I thought I had to pursue this very corporate path or this well-defined career path. And it's so refreshing to see that actually there's other possibilities out there and I can dream a little bit more. And so I don't know, like when you get some of those messages, you're just like, wow, like all the amount of hours that you spend behind the scenes editing the podcast. And people don't realize this. Like there is so much work behind the scenes to creating an episode of a podcast. And it just makes all those long hours worth it, right? You're just like, wow, and sometimes I think the thing with starting a podcast is it's very different from other social media platforms in that you don't have interaction with your audience.
Yeah.
And I think that is such a weird feeling because you keep creating episodes and you have no idea what people think about them. Do they like it? Do they not like it? Is the content resonating? Is it not resonating? Is anyone out there even listening to my podcast? So I think it was just so nice to have that. And those messages, then people started asking me more questions around career. So I then started just doing coaching on the side, answering questions here and there. Then I started off with just being a side hustle, honestly. I was like, okay, you know what? Like maybe I'll start charging people about this. And then it grew and grew. And now I'm lucky enough that I have enough students to make this my full-time business.
Yeah, no, that's very cool. I want to ask this point about putting your stuff or your product out there and see whether it sticks or whether there's demand. Now, what kind of success metrics did you use, or even if whether you were even thinking about it for your podcast, right? So for the phone case, maybe it's very simple, right? If there's no sales, then you know. But for podcasts or I think in a bigger format like content, how do you judge? How do you decide that it's successful or not?
Oh, one thing I do want to share that I didn't mention just now is that because there's so much work going on behind the scenes for a podcast, I was like, I need to make some money from this.
Yeah.
And I was like, how can I make money from a podcast? And so I went down this whole trail of just like exploring different ways, like, oh, okay, maybe I should bring an advertiser in, maybe I should do sponsor posts, whatever it might be, right? And I was like, okay, but for those, I need to accumulate like millions of listeners in order for me to even make like any substantial amount of money, right? Because you pay per thousand, and usually people pay like cents per thousand listeners, or like on the higher end, maybe dollars, like single-digit dollars per thousand listeners. And I'm like, oh my God, okay, it's going to take me like a very, very long time to build an audience to that size that I would be able to monetize it. And so then I started thinking, what are other ways I could do to monetize this? Because I know that for me, there is a sense of fulfillment that drives me towards continuing this podcast episode. But I think for me, I also know that when you have money is a powerful driver of continuing forward as well. As like, maybe that's not the most PC thing to say, but I think I do try to be real and vulnerable and share as transparently as I can. And I do think that money drives a lot of people's motivation. And I know that for me, money is a driver. And so how do I then monetize this? So I continue to create good content for people while at the same time not burn myself out. Because I know that if I continue on this path of making podcast episodes for free and not getting anything out of it, I'm going to burn myself out.
Yeah, spot on, 100%. I'm saying this a lot because we both do a similar stuff, right? We put content out there and we're not getting advertisement or sponsors paying us to do this. I think you and I started off like doing everything ourselves. So I understand going through all this. And I think to what you just said is that money, it's a way to refuel our passion. It gives us resources. And I think to be very practical, at least I think I talked to you about this before, which is that having money, making some money allows us, or at least allows me to outsource the editing or the parts that I don't like to do so that I can focus and spend more time doing what I love to do, right? And I think it's not necessarily an evil thing. It's just a resource, right? How you use it depends on you. And I just think it's a way to make your passion sustainable
Exactly.
so that you can keep on doing great things, or gives you that space to try and innovate certain formats, certain templates, a certain style, right, of delivering the content, or try certain things. And you need that buffer. And money is just a way to provide a buffer. So that's my take about all this money versus passion thing.
100%. Like, truly, what you said, I have nothing more to add. Like, hit the nail on its head.
Yeah.
Agreed.
No, we definitely need to talk more. I need to consult you more about making money through podcasts, but that's a separate topic altogether. And so you put your content out there and you start to receive people writing in and asking about this coaching services. And when did you decide, or what do you have to see? What did you see to make you jump into this full time?
Yeah. So actually, let me rewind a little bit, because I think this will be helpful, because I think a lot of people think that, oh, you just start coaching and then you build a program and then you charge people and it's like so straightforward. It's really not that straightforward. So let me rewind a little bit. So when I knew I wanted to start a coaching program, my first question was, okay, how? What kind of coaching program? So for a period of time, I was thinking maybe I'll do online course. I'd just record the videos and sell it. And so I was like, oh, you know what? I'm going to do an MVP and run a website and see if anybody clicks in the website and signs up. And so what I will tell you is that building a product is the easy part. Marketing is the hard part. It's not hard for you to create a product, but it is damn hard for you to find people who are willing to pay for your product. So basically, I ran this MVP thinking, oh, I could just create a landing page and send some people there and see people click into it. Crickets, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, nobody. And also back then, I didn't really know how to run Facebook ads and all of that stuff. So it was like kind of like a waste of money. Like, I didn't know what I was doing to run this test, right? So then I was like, okay, well, maybe let me try something else. And I kind of just tried to figure it out. And I was like, maybe I'll do one-on-one coaching. Let me see what will happen there. Let me see how I will design a program. Because at this point in time, I was just like randomly helping people here and there, right? It was like not really structured. And I would procrastinate, right? Because then I was like, well, I don't know. How do you get started? How do you structure this? All of that stuff. And at this point in time, then I randomly came across a business coach profile. And I was like, ooh, this person is teaching other people how to build a business in coaching. And they obviously teach like all types of coaching, right? Not just career coaching. And so I was like, ooh, interesting. All right. So I jumped on a call with her, and then she did her whole pitch, and then she told me how much the price was. And I was like, oh my God, no, thank you. I could not spend this kind of money. And I was like, okay, I'm a smart girl. I can figure this out. Let me go try to figure this out by myself. And I tried for 2 months, 3 months, 2 months, I think, 2 to 3 months, trying to figure this out by myself. And I couldn't. I got nowhere. I wasn't getting clients. I didn't know what sort of, I was like content creating, but not really like effectively content creating, right? So I wasn't really getting any leads on my social media posts. And so then I went crawling back to her. And I was like, no, please teach me your ways. I don't know how to do this. And I think that for me was such a big learning lesson that I continue to benefit from today, is invest in yourself. Like, truly, it was such a hard lesson for me to learn, because you don't think about spending 4 digits on your education. Like, you don't think about spending 4 figures on your own education, because, you know, in university, yes, like you think about that in a very different lens to like investing in your continual education today, right? Today, you're like, oh, I would never spend that kind of money, but you would easily spend that kind of money on a holiday. Yep. You would easily spend that kind of money on a luxury good.
Yeah.
But you don't think about spending and investing in yourself beyond university. And even someone who is so passionate about learning and constantly trying to improve myself, I went to a great university. I also am someone who is skeptical about investing in myself. And so it was great that I learned this lesson so early on in my life, because now I have seen my business grow to new levels because I've learned to invest in myself. So the very first time you invest in yourself is a hard pill to swallow. You're like, oh my God, I don't know. Is it worth this kind of money? Could be a scam. Maybe she's not that smart. Maybe I could figure this out by myself. But once you do, you're like, oh my God, this is money really well worth spending, because she got me to where I needed to go in 2-3 months. Whereas I wasted 2 to 3 months just trying to fumble around the dark, whatever, trying to figure things out by myself. And I couldn't. Whereas working with her for 2-3 months, I got an offer out the door. I got the confidence to start selling. I knew how to price my product. So I knew, okay. So I think working with her also gave me the confidence to sell a high ticket product. because previously I was charging like, oh, maybe like a few $100s. And I was already like, oh, that's like kind of expensive. And like, I wouldn't be able to do that. And I didn't have the confidence. But she was like, no, you must start 4 figures or above. And I was like, but how can I? Like, I don't know. Imposter syndrome again, right? And so that's how she coached me through all of that. She was like, okay, offer like a discount for your first client, all of that stuff. So you slowly build up to it. But because she taught me all of these things, I am able to build a business today. Because I invested in her, I am able to build a business today. And I think that is one of those things that I think a pivotal moment in my life and a pivotal lesson that I learned.
How do you get to know about her?
I randomly found her. That's the thing. I randomly found her on social media, which is when I knew if I can randomly find her, that means she's figured out something about social media that I haven't. And I want people to randomly find me going forward.
Got it. And did you consult or did you speak with other business coaches?
No, because I didn't find them.
Okay. And you use Instagram as a medium to find business coaches?
I actually saw her post on LinkedIn. And then I started following her on Instagram. And then her content really resonated with me. And then after a few of, following her for a while, then I decided to reach out to her, book a call with her to just chat. And that's how it went.
Nice. I could pick up a few tips from you about how to find the right coach.
Happy to share. Yeah.
And I want to come back to this point about if you were to look back at your career journey so far, what's one thing you wish you had done differently?
I'm not someone who regrets, and I do tend to focus on moving forward because I think every decision I've made in my life, I have learned something from. And I think if I had done my life differently, I may not have learned these lessons. So I don't know if I would honestly do anything differently. I do think that starting my career at BlackRock was a great move because, and that's an advice I do give a lot of younger people, right, is do start your career. There is value in starting your career at a prestigious institution because it lends you credibility when you have no credibility as a fresh grad. And that then helps you take your career to the next level. So I have no regrets starting my career in finance, getting the training there, learning from the best of the best. And I may have left earlier, but honestly, I don't think I would have left earlier. Knowing who I am and the risk aversion and how much I care about how other people view me externally, I don't think I would have left, honestly, any earlier than I did.
Do you care as much about how people look at you?
I care less, but I definitely still do care. But I think that was also another lesson that I learned over time, right? Is if I am not happy with myself, it doesn't matter how I look to other people. Because at the end of the day, if I look in the mirror and I don't like who I am, why does it matter what other people think of me? But that was a really hard lesson for me to learn. That took a lot of time to unpack for myself. Because I think my whole life I've been building my life to what other people think is good.
Do you think that's a typical Asian thing?
I think so. I think definitely more so much more prevalent in Asia.
Yep, my observation too. Yeah,
and I think it's because we live in a very team-based culture. It's very much versus in the Western world where it's maybe more individualistic and you're more celebrated as an individual. So there's less like, oh, what will this mean for people around me? Or like, will I be seen as a disappointment to my parents? I think that culture, because Asia is so much more team-based, you think more as a unit. How will my decisions affect people around me? Whereas I think in the Western world, it is much more individualistic and you are able to make decisions more in a vacuum, I guess.
Yeah, I can talk a lot about this one, but yeah, I want to save time. But my quick one on that is that my thing is that living, because you grew up in Hong Kong and me in Singapore, I think that's my observation, right? Living in a densely populated city where everyone's like so close, you bump into people everywhere, right? This tendency to compare, I think, is even higher. Of course, you got New York City and all that, which is also very cramped, but But I think plus the fact that we're Asian and I think the way we're brought up and what you said about team versus individual, all this adds to comparing and looking good, sometimes looking good at the expense of others, which is not very healthy. But I'm happy for you that you took a long time, yes, but at least you realize this now, and because you got the rest of your life to live, right? And I'm sure there's a very good lens to live your life, the rest of your life from now on.
Yeah, exactly.
So
lessons learned.
Yeah, and this is a life's journey. Right? We don't just like go school and come out bum, right? Adult, everything is all there, right? It's just impossible, right? And everyone's different. And even if we are all different personalities, our lives evolve with time.
Exactly.
We grew up being A, but over time, or maybe because of circumstances or something that happened, we became B or C, right? So yeah, it's a journey, right? Like, you just cannot foresee and restrict yourself how you're going to grow. And I think this is what life is all about. You grow. Okay, so now the next stage of the conversation that I want to have with you, Jennifer, is talk about career coaching, right? And I have lots of questions for this. And why I have so many questions? Because I started my podcast, and I have my own career changes, and that drives me to really help people who could be in that crossroads of their life or their career, because I empathize with that. And that's also the mission that drives me to do the podcast. And with you, I found an ally in a way. I found a kindred spirit, and I resonate with the messages. And when earlier you said that putting yourself out there, I thought you did a really good job of putting yourself out there on social media. And I think you're very consistent. So I think that's also a good thing. I think it's one of the lessons that you got from the business coach. Now, allow me to just ask you about career, right, in general, like maybe on the bigger picture, on the macro picture, like what is your personal career philosophy? How should one think about career?
Wow, that is a deep question.
I thought I'll start with macro and then zooming down, but take this question however you want it.
I think what I've learned in the last couple of years is that a career that you're passionate about is great. But I think a career where you are aligned with the mission is even greater. So I think that if you look at Maslow's hierarchy, for example, hierarchy of needs, I think self-actualization is at the top of that hierarchy. And what self-actualization is, basically being able to bring your full self and really be able to be your full self. And I think passion is one aspect of self-actualization, but I think being able to contribute to something bigger than yourself is really what is at the apex of it. And I think that's really one of the reasons why I left my job at Style Theory to start career coaching, because career coaching to me gave me that sort of purpose that was stronger than what I got from working in a field that I was passionate about.
That's deep. A deep answer to a deep question. Yeah, no, but I like that very much. Thank you. I'm aligned with that. I think from Hong Kong and Singapore, I think we are kind of already first world countries, I feel, or at least with first world incomes. And I think to be able to, or one of the things that I judge societies or people, right, is how much they care about people they are weaker than them, or the vulnerable and the weak, for example, animals or the minorities. And I think to be able to think about and serving to a cause larger than yourself, to me, that's a good attribute or benchmark of a great society. So I'm aligned with you on that. You put it very beautifully. What are the most common career questions you typically get?
This is one I always get. I want to switch careers, but I don't know what to do next. Or I want to switch careers, but I am afraid of having to start all over again. I want to switch careers, or I have to go back to, that means I have to go back to school, right? Or I'm too many years into my career path. It's too late for me to do this. And that's usually people who are in their 40s plus. Will be like, oh, it's too much for me to switch now.
Okay. What are some of the biggest career change or career?
I think a lot of the times it's this inability to switch, right? I think that's one. Like, I don't feel like I can switch. And I think a lot of people get bogged down by imposter syndrome. I think imposter syndrome is a very powerful force and can hold you back. And it is hard to put yourself out there when you feel so much imposter syndrome. I read a really good quote the other day from Adam Grant, I think, which was the difference between people who feel imposter syndrome and people who actually accomplish things. Both people start, I'm totally butchering this, but the main takeaway that I got was the main difference between people who have imposter syndrome and people who have a growth mindset is that people, they both start from a place of fear. They both think, I cannot do this because I don't know how. But the growth mindset is, I will learn to figure it out. Whereas the imposter mindset says, someone will catch me and find out that I don't know. That's the difference. And it's such a powerful reframe of your mind to be like, I can figure this out. I don't know what I'm doing, but I can figure this out. And I think I was maybe in a lucky enough position in that every single job I've had, someone took a chance on me. And I never had the prior experience before going into that job. So over the past decade, I have really learned to have a growth mindset that I can figure this out. I entered every single job not knowing what I was doing. And so I think I've been lucky enough to have this growth mindset instilled in me. And I think that that's why I'm able to put myself out there in all these situations and grow instead of being held back by imposter syndrome.
Yeah, I like that, the line about along our career, there must have been people who have faith in our abilities that put us at where we were. And I like that. And I think I want to add on to that is that I am grateful for that. And I now tend to want to give back, right? I want to pay it forward, right? And there were times in my career I had to hire people, and it's skills, it's hunger that I hire for, because the hard skills I can teach, right? Right. And
100%. Oh
right.
my God.
Right. And everyone is equal, because so what? You're from an Ivy League school or from a normal school, you're still zero at a job, at the culture, at the company, right? So everyone's the same, right? But
people,
if you're hungry,
need to listen to this. Literally, you gotta listen. Like, guys, like, double highlight this paragraph.
yeah. And now I tend to look forward. I said, look, I want to hire for hunger, someone, because if you really want it in the world today where internet is so prevalent and you can find so many resources, it's about whether you want to go out there and make the effort to find the things and accomplish the things. The hunger is so much hard to teach, right? It's much harder to teach. You cannot teach hunger.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I think that's what I want people to hear, right? Is for this to come from hiring managers. So people are willing to then put themselves out there, right? Because people think, oh, I could never apply to that job because I don't have the prior experience. But actually, coming from someone who is hiring people, you oftentimes hire for hunger and drive rather than for the technical skills, because a lot of the times that technical skill can be taught. And I think that's a message that is not shared enough.
Spot on. And maybe I didn't tell you this before this conversation, but along the way, or even before I started a podcast, I became the guy that people call to ask about career advice, right? Because they see my career moves, they say, hey, how do you do that, right? So one of the things that I find myself liking to say is that don't apply for a job that you fulfill 100% of the requirements, right? Because if you do that, then how do you grow?
Exactly.
So, and as we spoke about earlier, like there are hiring managers out there that hire for hunger, for attitude, more than just your physical or experience or skills, right? Or your hard skills. So you need to put yourself out there, and that's where you need to have the growth mindset to try. Because I read this, right? And this is from you, right? If you don't apply, if you don't try, you miss 100% of the shots, right?
Exactly.
If you try, there's a chance, right?
Exactly.
So don't feel that you are inadequate, right? There'll be people out there who are hiring managers that want to hire for all these things. And of course, there's a way for you to get the hunger. And sometimes through interviews, you can't fake it too much, right? How much interest, how much work you put in to prepare for interview, all this, you can't fake it. So I just want to add to that. Yeah, I didn't want to take the limelight of you.
100%. Totally agree. Truly. And I think that just to add on to that, which is that a lot of the times I tell people not to go for roles that headhunters find them, because usually headhunters only look for candidates that fill 100% of that role's criteria. And so if you are looking to grow, maybe go for a role where you don't hit 100% of that criteria.
My advice on this, on headhunters, is that I use them as a fishing net. I use them as a connectors. I use them to find out what's out there in the industry. For example, if someone's very passionate about this particular industry, and usually headhunters, they could be hunting for, let's say, tech, e-commerce or any particular sector. And it's good to find out who are the movers and shakers, right? Who's coming in to hire, who's got the resources, who's got deep pockets to hire a recruiter to hire people. And that's how I get inside info. That's how I get industry info. But I know that at least what I heard in Singapore is that the recruiters are very transactional. So they just throw your CV just hopefully to get the job. But after that, if you don't get it, you have no chance, they just don't talk to you after that. So for me, I'm aware of that. And that's why I tell people that you got to be pragmatic about how you deal with them. It's good to keep them warm sometimes if you're in the looking stage, especially if you know what industry you're looking at. But that's my take.
It's good advice.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, because they are connectors to jobs market now. And maybe 2 years later, 3 years later, right? Maybe you don't want to move yet, but down the road, you want to keep them warm, right? Make sure that they know you, and so that you can ask, hey, how's it going? And you can have a coffee, right? I mean, just invest in a coffee, right? Maybe $10 in an hour, right? And just to find out how things are like. And likewise, I think recruiters also want to find out about people in the industry to find out what's the movement, who are the big brand names and all that. So I feel there can be benefits to engage recruiters, but I agree with your point that recruiters want to look for a perfect fit. But if you go to the industry that's fast moving, that is a bit nascent, then it's going to be hard for anybody, right? Be in-house or recruiters to look for someone that fulfill 100% of the requirements, right? So, but of course, it's a different topic, right? About going to the right industries or fast moving industries. So, but what you say applies.
Yeah, for sure. 100%.
What is the typical profile of your students so far?
Usually it's people who are quite similar to me, actually. I think because they resonate with my story. And a lot of the times I think career coaching, or people look for career coaches similar to how they look for therapists, right? There's a lot of chemistry involved because I'm working with you one-on-one. We're meeting on a weekly basis. We're spending an hour together talking about these pretty deep questions. You need to feel comfortable talking to me. And I think I tend to attract students who are quite similar to me because I think they resonate with my background and with my story.
Is it intentional?
It was not, actually. I really just put my content out there, and I think people just filtered based off of that. I think it would just happen organically. It wasn't something that I particularly set in motion.
In a phone call we had before this chat a few weeks back, I think you spoke about, when I asked you this similar question about your typical profile of your students, you said they're high achievers, right? You said that I would be surprised to know about their unique issues and challenges. Okay, the context is this. I felt that someone of your profile who has got a good college education, or at least a branded college education, would be easier, right, to have options. But you told me, say, no, not really. So can you just expand on that for the audience?
Yeah, so I think you would think that these people can have every option there is out there waiting for them. But the thing is, a lot of it is in their mind. They are trapped in a golden cage because you have it so well. You think, why should I leave this? And I have so much more at risk to give up, to move to something unknown. And I think a lot of it is kind of working through a lot of those hurdles with them. And I think I used to be in a similar position, and I felt like I had a lot to give up to try something so unknown.
And my take on this is that when I was younger, I took more risks in my career, right? I joined a startup, I did my own business. And to me, the currency that I was using was not the bank balance that I have in my bank account. It's more about time. And I felt that when you're younger, you have nothing to lose. Okay, at least for me, I'm fortunate enough in the sense that I still stay with my parents back then. So if I'm hungry, I just go to the fridge, right? Their fridge, just open up food, right? So I don't pay rental, I don't pay food. So that's how I felt about like taking risks. And I felt that I could take more risks when I was younger. When you're older, I think you may be more set in your ways. Of course, that's internal, what's happening in your head, but also lifestyle and maybe this thing about like meeting a potential life partner and then settling down and having a family. So, but yeah, that's my take about like, what's there to lose?
Yeah, exactly.
Anything you want to add?
I think the other thing that they share, that a lot of times I share with my students is we were so good at chasing goals that other people set for us that we oftentimes never spend time figuring out what it is that we want for ourselves. So I think that's also one of the hardest parts. And I think that's where I really am able to help a lot of my students get clarity on is, okay, now that I'm done chasing what other people want from me, what's next? What do I want from my own life? And I think that is a pretty difficult question to ask, and a pretty difficult question to answer. And a lot of times you also have blind spots, right? And so I think that's why it's helpful to have a coach kind of guide you through this, to be able to show you and shed light on maybe some of your blind spots.
Yeah. I don't know how's it like growing up in Hong Kong, how's the school system is like. Maybe I'm guessing it's pretty similar. And my thing on this is that my observation is in Singapore, I think at least my generation grew up knowing what's good to have, what's good to go to, meaning like different stages in school, primary and then secondary. And then of course there is like the branded schools. And then after secondary, the JC, which is junior college or a polytechnic. And I felt that a lot of us grew up knowing what's good to go to, but not knowing what we want.
Exactly.
Right? And I can't say it's a very Asian thing, but maybe the way I analyze it is that my parents' generation, it's probably the second generation. I mean, my grandparents came from China, so it was a very kind of different times, colonial times. I think my grandparents or my parents saw the transformation of Singapore from like living in kampongs to like a proper HDB in a building. We're actually getting tap water, right? And also electricity by a flick of a switch. So the kind of mentality that they've gone through, and that affects how their life values and how they teach their children, like to go for something safe, stable, don't rock the boat, be glad that you got a job, be glad that you're able to feed the family. What more do you want, right? So, and then we are just not in tune to exploring our passions and talents and curiosity when we're young, right? It's about survival mode. That's my observation about Singapore growing up. And I realized that then this group of millennials grew up knowing what good to have, but don't know what they want. But they realize that, hey, as you get older, life is getting shorter, right? You have not much time left. Are you going to keep on living the life that other people want of you? When's it time to live your own life, right? So that's where I feel a lot of like frustrations on both sides, right? Employers, right, where they think, why is the younger generation so self-entitled? But then employers are like, hey, why there's no work-life balance, right? I want to live a proper life, not just being employed all my life, right? So I know I'm ranting, but that's my observation.
And I think it's spot on, right? And I think it's because we grew up in such a different environment, like how our parents grew up versus how we are currently growing up, and the opportunities that they had versus the opportunities we have nowadays. I mean, think about it, just in terms of the number of jobs that have, or the number of career paths that are available to us today because of the internet, because of social media, that were not available for my parents' generation. Think about it. If I lived in the 1980s, 1990s, would I be able to start a career coaching business and be able to find students on social media? No, it would be way harder for me to do this. And so because in their generation, it is so much harder to start a business, they think, why would you put yourself through the pains of this? Because for them, it was really difficult to do it. And so they would never consider this. For them, the lucrative, safe path is actually going to a corporate job, because the opportunity they just didn't have as many opportunities as we do today. And so I think it took me a long time to recognize this as well for myself, and to understand where my parents come from, right? When they give you this advice, that obviously comes out of love, but I think it just comes from a different generation and a different time. And we just live in a different world today.
Yeah. I will go to this spiel that I always give when I was 27 and started my career. I was in banking, and then I left all that to start a laser tech business. And a lot of folks were like, "Oh, why the hell do you do that?" And I give them this spiel, right, which is that, and bear with me on this one. It's like, okay, in Singapore, the context is that I went to a business university, so a lot of us went up to the join the finance or the banking industry. But as we all know, the banking and finance industry is very much linked with the economic cycle, right? The recession or the boom. But that's my point, is Singapore's economic structure, or at least my context that I'm experienced to, it's a lot more financial services, right? I went to a business school, and then my friends all went to finance generally, right? But I said, look, and when you join the banking or the finance sector, it's very linked to economic cycles, and the world has changed. In the past, you could have a boom for 10, 20 years, but with globalization and other factors, now the world's economy is a lot more intertwined. And with that means that you're going to see a lot more shorter economic cycles. You're going to see more booms and recessions a lot more quicker, a lot shorter cycles, which means that if you are a fresh grad and in a corporate job in the bank, you are safe because you are the cheapest, right, among the rest. But 5 years later, 10 years later, you'll be getting more pay, you'll be more expensive. And if recession happens, they're going to fire people. Who will they fire? Right? They will keep the fresh grad because the fresh grad gets 1/3 of your pay, but works 3 times more, right? Because there's no obligations, no family and all that. So, and I seen this when I was in banking, my clients tell me that. They said that the higher they climb, the more scared they are when it comes to recession. So I just think that of course, times are different, choices are different, options are different, but I also think economic cycles are also different. Yeah, but that's my spiel on like why we need to think about other options than just staying in banking or in a corporate job.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sometimes the corporate job is not as safe as you think it is, right? Especially in the recent few months where there's just layoffs across multiple industries, not just in tech, in finance, but really across the board. People are laying off, right? So these corporate jobs that you thought you were in for the job security is not actually as secure as you think it is.
Yeah. Our parents' time could be more loyal to a company because it was not the nature of the companies to fire, right? Or to hire and fire, right? And maybe also because the economic cycles didn't justify for that. But times are different, right?
Exactly.
And yeah, I think your company is not your friend. It's not your family,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
So yeah, okay, that's quite deep. That's quite dark. Okay, moving on to your. I'm curious about your coaching philosophy and style, right? What career topics do you cover? What do you not cover?
Yeah. So basically in my career coaching program, I guide you through 3 different modules. The very first module is really around self-discovery. So I get you to really understand who you are. So we work on limiting beliefs, addressing what those limiting beliefs are and helping you overcome them, because a lot of the times you yourself is the one who's stopping you from your dream job. And it's the mind and the sort of work that you need to do around your mind. Then we look and identify your values. So what do you value from a life, from a career? Is it financial stability? Is it job security? Or is it passion? Is it impact? Is it some combination of some of these? But more importantly, how do you prioritize them? What are you willing to give and take? How much of it are you willing to give and take? Then we go into understanding your strengths. What are your superpowers? What is it that you bring to the table and makes you hireable and makes someone want to pay for your skills? Then we go into identifying your interests. What exactly are you interested in? How do we then, and then we take all of these things in module 1 that we figured out about you and translate that into a job in module 2. So in module 2, then we look at, okay, researching the job that makes sense for you. So at this point, we'll have identified a handful of jobs that make sense for you, combining your values, interests, and strengths. Then we will go do some research, really understand what does it mean to work in this job. And the best way for you to research and understand the job is actually talking to the people in that industry, talking to the people who are actually doing that job day in, day out. And so the benefit of talking to people is not just getting good clarity, but also building your network in that space. Because a lot of times if you're pivoting, you have to go and build a brand new network for yourself. So this way you'll have some mentors in that space and hopefully be able to get some referrals when you do apply to jobs. Then we go and test drive your career. So this one is super, super fun. And one thing that I love doing with my students, but basically what we do is, okay, now we've identified that you want to do, let's say, marketing for a fintech company. Okay, why don't you go out and try to do that for a weekend? What is your marketing strategy for this fintech company? Put it together, write it out. See if you even enjoy spending one day doing this task. If you don't, well, then maybe it's not really the right role for you. And the best part of this is now you have a portfolio of work that you can use to showcase in your interview. And that's how you are going to stand out from people who are just blasting their resumes. And lastly, then we go into writing the job description to your dream job. So here we will be able to very clearly articulate for you, what kind of company do you want to work for? Is it large? Is it small? International? Local? What type of culture are you looking for? What type of salary? What type of benefits? And more importantly, the role and responsibilities that you want to have. So at this point, after 2 modules, you will have a very good understanding of what type of job you want to move forward next. Then we moved into the final module, which is around landing the job. So here we then focus on helping you craft your transition story. So a lot of times people think, I can't possibly switch careers because I'll have to start all over again. What I tell them is, no, you're just bad at selling yourself. You just need to be able to sell your existing skill set into the new job. So how do you do that? I teach you here. Then we obviously go and help you with your resume, make sure that your resume is selling and sharing that same story. Then we go and help you prepare for interviews so that you are able to get as many job offers as possible. And the last one that we have is building your personal brand. So instead of you always going out to apply to jobs, how do you start to get some inbound leads? How do you build up your personal brand? So that's in a nutshell, the entire program over 3 different modules. And I guide you from being lost and confused and unhappy about your job to actually being able to clearly identify what your dream job looks like and landing that dream job.
Wonderful. No, I'm impressed. I'm impressed. I have one question about test driving, the stage about test driving a career. Is there a stage that you recommend or you teach your students to do it after they apply and go for interviews? Before.
So you want to have a good sense of what you want to move into first, and then you go apply. So that will usually yield you the best results because you're taking a targeted approach.
Cool.
And I think I'm quite different from other coaching programs out there in that I am very structured and I've really thought through how to get you from A to B because I have figured out a blueprint that works, not only for myself, but for my clients. And so there is actually a way to get you from unknown and unhappy about your job to your dream job. And everybody can do it. They just need to have the blueprint and the guidance to get themselves there.
And this takes in the form of like Zoom calls with your students?
Yes.
And is it like a worksheet? Is there, I don't know.
Yes. So I actually have an entire workbook that I guide them through that I get them to do in each session. And there's also some homework that they need to do to prepare ahead of our next session. So it's very much like a course, like a school.
And I think this is the right time to mention this. So as we speak right now, between Jennifer and I think we are working out, like, I won't call it a package, but we're working out probably a deal where you, after listening to this podcast, you're able to click, the link will be provided in the description, and then you can find out more from what Jennifer is offering. And that's also a big reason why I asked her to be on this podcast. I just wanted her to give her insights and also to walk her through, right? So as if now I'm like a trial lesson, right? A trial student. And so that people in our audience who are wondering about career coaching services and what Jennifer got to offer or to teach you, you actually get to hear it, sort of preview it over here in this episode.
Yes.
And this is cool. I really like that. I think framework is good because I like the first part about because what you said earlier about a lot of internal hurdles. I think when I talk to my friends, it's also, I feel all about the self-limiting beliefs, right?
Exactly.
And I think a coach comes in handy here to be the accountability buddy, to walk you through without judgment, without bias, because your spouse can do it, or your friend can do it, but you're afraid of all this like judgment and or someone sugarcoating this, right? Like, oh no, you're actually good, well done, and all that. Why should you change? You're fine the way you are. Maybe you could do more of your hobbies. Don't change your jobs. So you want someone that's very objective that will help you through this journey. And I think that's a wonderful thing about having a coach. And the beliefs part, I mean, of course, I like to think that I'm a subscriber to the whole growth mindset theory. And I feel that there's nothing one can do if you put your mind to it, or at least give a good damn try, right, to get it done. And if you try it, you didn't get it, okay, so what? You move on, right? I think regrets are the worst thing in life. That's one of my philosophies.
Yes.
So yeah, you think something's nudging you to try something new. If you don't try it now, you're going to regret it when you're later on in life, and there's something more you can do later on, right? It's not impossible, but I think it's going to be tougher. So I like the whole thing about challenging the internal limiting beliefs.
Yep, exactly. And I think one more thing I want to highlight is that a lot of people, they just focus on module 3 when they're looking for a job, right? A lot of the times they're like, okay, I don't like my job, and so I just want to blast my resume everywhere. And they just focus on updating their resume and going for interviews. And I give this analogy a lot, which is getting into your dream job is a step-by-step process, right? It's kind of like cooking noodles. There's step 1, you have to take a pot. Step 2, fill it with water. And then step 3, put the noodles. If you just put the noodles directly on the stove, well, guess what? The noodles will burn, right? But yet a lot of people, when they approach their careers, they skip step 1, self-discovery, and step 2, translating that into a job. And they just focus on landing the job. They just focus on interviews. They just focus on resume. And so that's why a lot of people get stuck in a career where you're just jumping from job to job that you don't like.
Yeah. It's like a short-term solution, right? But you're not solving the problem at its root.
Exactly.
Right. My thing on this is that I tell my friends sometimes to check out what's out there. So I see as two things, right? If I describe it as a demand and supply thing, supply meaning it's your own mindset, demand meaning like who are the companies demanding such talents. So I tell my friends sometimes that see what are the companies, what are the roles out there, and that gives you at least go through the JD, and that gives you a sense of like who it's hiring, how many of such roles are available, just to keep in reality check. Sometimes you may, after watching an awesome movie or spending an awesome weekend doing something else, you want to do something else totally different. But I also think it's good to have that reality check by seeing who are hiring, especially if you don't want to deviate too much, at least from your income band or your industry. Yeah, but that's my thing. But of course, this is a very general advice that I tell people. Or sometimes I say, look, if your backside is itchy, look at what's out there by looking at the jobs board, right? And see who is hiring what. And if you are indifferent, you just want maybe a better paying job or try a different industry, or you know what's out there, then I think a jobs board tells the signs of the times, right? I mean, that's my thing. So that's my perspective.
It's a very good pulse check for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So I want to ask you, what does success look like to you now?
Wow. That is such a good question. I think it's a combination of financial success, definitely, a combination of fulfillment, that self-actualization that I was talking about earlier. For me, another thing that I really am optimizing my life for right now is also flexibility in terms of my time and location. I want to be in control of my time. And I think that was one of the things that I knew I wouldn't be able to get if I continued to stay on in a corporate route, especially as you move up into higher and higher level positions. So I think those are really my definition of success. It's a combination of obviously monetary, self-actualization, and flexibility, I would say.
How did success look like to you 5 years ago?
Oh, I think prestige was so high up on that list of things that I think I care a lot less about now in my life. I think back then all I cared for truly was prestige and maybe money.
And my final question, what's your one big message to the world?
I think bet on yourself. I think a lot of the times we invest in stocks, we invest in luxury goods, we invest in other people, but so often we forget to invest in ourselves and take a chance on ourselves. And I think that was my key learning of 2022 and what I hoped to achieve in 2022. I think a lot of the decisions I made in 2022 was a big bet on myself. I could have failed. There were a lot of moments where I think things could have gone wrong. And I think it is scary before you take a bet on yourself, but I think it has yielded me a lifestyle and rewards that I don't think I would have been able to achieve had I not bet on myself.
I can't ask for a better way to end this conversation. And Jennifer, it's been an absolute pleasure having you. And
Thank you so much, John.
And we speak soon, Jennifer.
All right, sounds good.
Take care.
All right, thank
Bye-bye.
you.